We're in conversation this evening with Vincent Gallo, star, director, writer, and composer for the new film Buffalo 66. Vincent, welcome to Celluloid Dreams tonight.
Thank you very much.
Vincent, Buffalo 66 is the story of a troubled young guy whom you play in the movie, Billy Brown, saddled with unloving parents, who's searching for love and who winds up finding it not where he expected or necessarily wanted it. A couple questions to just start this going here. What was the genesis of the story, and was this a story creatively that was kind of begging to be written?
There always was probably a tiny bit of vindictive nature in me from childhood. And as I went through different experiences that I felt were less than appropriate, I would, somewhere in the back of my mind, think that someday, as a public figure, if I demanded myself to become a public figure, I could turn it around somehow and represent this horror publicly for all the world to see. The original delusion that I had was that I was going to become a superstar at something, go on the Johnny Carson show and say something nasty to my mother and father. Was that the motivation to write the script? No. The conception of the script came as a sarcastic joke at the Cannes Film Festival years ago, where I pitched a story about a guy who has to pee for the first 15 minutes of the film. And I engaged a group of creepy producers and sleazy film creeps at Cannes at the Hotel de Cap with this humorous credit sequence, as I called it then. Another thing happened once I was driving across the country on one of my many road trips, and I have a gazillion cassettes that I've made over the years. I have 15,000 albums, so I keep making these cassettes for road films. Somewhere on one of the cassettes, at the very tail end of it, I didn't cover up a piece of music that had been recorded by me 20 years before. And it was when I recorded my father singing Fools Rush In my bedroom in Buffalo, New York. And I was a bit startled by just how good he was. One always imagines things when they're young, how big they are, how fantastic they are. But as an adult, one can sometimes be disappointed. I, however, when I listened to this cassette, was not disappointed. I was shocked by how good my father actually sang. So that was another premise for a scene in a film, a scene where the father sings incredibly and he is, at the end of the song, back again, this miserable, horrible person that he is, So just this juxtaposition of extreme sensitive talent and extreme rage and horror. And the concept of the love story is something that I believe in very strongly in my political and philosophical point of view, which is that adults are not victims and adults need to choose relationships that are appropriate for them, choose to act out on their negative feelings, their resentments, their angers in the most productive ways possible, to kind of act contrary to the routine that they've been repeating for years and years. And so the story of Billy Brown's commitment to change his life there is a very deep and powerful concept to me, and something that I'm rigorously identifying in all my concepts of how human beings behave.
So were your parents like Janet and Jimmy in the movie? I mean, you use them as sort of like a template for, because the parents in this film are really just whoo.
The Buffalo 66 script is a pure piece of fiction. However, the role played by Ben and Angelica, the roles of my mother and father, are very much identical to my mother and father. I mean, if you were a relative or a friend of the family, you would say that I had done a brilliant job at portraying a realistic view of my mother and father. However, people are a bit more complicated in real life and over a longer period of time than they can be presented in a short film. My father and mother are actually much more exaggerated than the characters in the film. My mother's a bigger football fanatic. My father's much more raging and violent than in the film. But if one puts them into the context of their generation, their upbringing, their way of living, they did the best they can. They are very funny, amusing, charismatic, talented people. My father's one of the most talented men I've ever met in my life, and my mother is certainly a devoted fanatic, which is always an attractive quality to me. At this point in my life as an adult, they are not such toxic characters in my life, so the characters in the film are a little more destructive to the character of Billy Brown, well, a lot more than they are to me in my life. But the truth is, growing up, that is very much the mother and father that I had to grow up with. The fortunate thing is I didn't become exactly like Billy Brown. I became nothing like Billy Brown. I have my own extreme problems, but they're much different than Billy Brown.
Have your parents actually seen the film?
Yes, they said I premiered the world premiere of my film in Buffalo, and I invited my mother, father, 250 relatives, 250 friends of mine and the families, and every cute girl that I remembered from growing up in Buffalo.
To what extent do you feel that making Buffalo 66 helped you to come to terms with a lot of those unhappy experiences you went through growing up?
Making the film didn't do any of that. Writing the script was the catharsis. The real obsession that I have is not in bitter resentment against my mother and father. I'm much more obsessed with methodical aesthetic and my artistic sensibility and my point of view, socially and artistically. The real relief was not in being able to exorcise the demons of my mother and father. It was to once be able to control completely my aesthetic point of view, my sensibility, and my ideas conceptually about art and cinema. That was the relief. It's the first time in my life. I mean, I had a very successful career as a painter in the 80s, but somehow just engaging with an art dealer and an art gallery and the lack of control over the collectors, how the pieces were hung, et cetera, was already a major sacrifice. I never even felt good about the work, but it was the thing that I felt most in control of. In cinema, I've always felt unpleasant feelings completely. I've never felt that any performance I've done was either written better than I could have rewritten it or originated it, or I've never felt that the director had a point of view to capture the character or the performance in a way that I was comfortable with. So it's always been agony.
You said that this movie's about becoming capable of love. I think I read that somewhere that you said that. Now, how does one, I'm going to put you on the spot here, how does one become capable of love, and how does Billy in the movie become capable of love?
There's a great song from the late 40s called Nature Boy, where the last line in the song is, "The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return." One behaves always out of fear, resentment, anger, revenge, or hope, compassion, and love. The way one becomes able to love is by overcoming the fears, the resentments, and the angers, and being open to intimacy. One can do it compulsively, which is the way most people do it. They compulsively fall in love as a sort of substitution for overcoming those extreme negative feelings, and they sedate themselves with it without truly having intimacy. What Billy Brown does is he chooses a relationship, a person who's capable of being loving and honest and devoted, and he allows himself to not act out of complete fear, to be slightly open and vulnerable and hopeful and compassionate and especially vulnerable with the character of Layla. I know all that sounds like a bunch of crap, but really, the 20th century is quite neurotic, and people have relationships in a very unusual way. And I don't know too many people who have real intimacy that seems to feel good for them. So certainly in my life, I haven't had 1 second of Billy Brown's transformation at the end of the film.
We're with Vincent Gallo, director, screenwriter, composer, and lead actor of Buffalo 66. Vincent, one of the things I really liked about the movie earlier, you were talking about how one becomes capable of loving. The way you dramatized, there's a scene towards the end of the movie, and I don't want to give this away, but you know, Billy exhibits all those things you were talking about earlier, fear, insecurity, and all those things. It sort of affects his life. It affects the way he deals with his best friend, everybody that, but there's a moment where he starts to realize that he is being loved, and it's a confirmation for him. I don't want to give too much away here, but the change in his behavior. He's in a donut shop. There's a great scene. He's in a donut shop and he's buying hot chocolate for his girlfriend, Layla. And the way he treats the clerk, the way he treats the fellow that's sitting there having coffee and a donut, it was just a beautiful scene. It's very genuine, very authentic. And to me, that was the point of the movie, that scene. What were you thinking about when you wrote that?
Well, a lot of people are very conscious of what they feel is their spiritual awakenings, you know, their trips on, you know, so it's their support of Tibet, or their books that they read, or their yoga. The truth is, the people who are really attractive to be around, really, to be around certain people, you get a feeling of, you get a real serenity and you get a real ease being around them. They're people who are able to, who are not acting so severely out of revenge, fear, and anger. I mean, that's what being, spiritual really is, or being healthy, or being attractive as a person. One can't eliminate those thoughts completely out of one's mind all the time, because one doesn't have complete control over one's feelings. But what Billy Brown does in the end is he acts as if, he behaves contrary to those feelings. So he's suddenly open to the possibility of the idea that he doesn't have to, that he has a choice, that he doesn't have to live in constant resentment, fear, and anger. And the minute he does that, this person, this very charismatic, loving, excited, clever person is allowed to exist. And to see this person for the first time is fantastic. It's just really fantastic. And I've had moments like that where I've been able to overcome those demons, and it's very seductive. It's very addictive. It's a very addictive feeling, and that's certainly how I want to live my life if I can. That's certainly my goal and struggle, and it's certainly the kind of people that I like to be around. Who are interested in that mood, let's say. But how it happens, the interesting thing is Billy doesn't find somebody who loves him, and that's the exact thing that happens. What he does is he finds somebody who loves him, and he accepts being loved. And that's the real key. That he accepts it, and he chooses to accept it with the right person. He makes a good choice. And that's part, coming out of jail and immediately going to your parents' house to be punished is, it's part of his low self-esteem and bad judgment. And when he has good judgment, eventually, he's rewarded. Good things happen. Anytime you do something out of hope and compassion, you always have good results in the end. Really, it's fairly simple in theory. It's just difficult to do. It takes a lot of courage to act like that.
You wrote this thing, you directed it, you composed the music, you're the lead actor, and the cast is great too. We're kind of running out of time here because I wanted to get into that, but we don't have time. I wanted to ask you just a question about independent filmmaking in general. Because Buffalo 66 is so personal, yet its themes speak universally. Can film, just by definition, do you think, which is so much a collective artist's endeavor, can it ever really be as personal as independent films claim that they are?
Well, I don't categorize myself as an independent filmmaker, or I don't feel close to that term or to the other people who love to use that term. I mean, there's good movies and there's bad movies. I mean, some of the biggest assholes I've ever worked with or worked for pretended to be independent filmmakers. Some of the most conservative and square and businesslike and ambitious and desperate to be part of the mainstream, et cetera, et cetera. Even especially the companies themselves, these small companies, when you cast a movie with a $2 million budget, and they tell you have to have, Winona Ryder, Dustin Hoffman, Al Pacino, and Meryl Streep, or they're not going to give you the money. What they're basically saying is, if they can't pre-sell the film and guarantee themselves a large profit, they're not going to invest in your movie no matter what. Some studios, I mean, when a studio puts up $50 million, they're not pre-selling the movie. They're the ones who are actually taking more of a risk. So sometimes it makes more sense that they're so desperately willing to pander to the mainstream. But independent producers are even less willing to take risks. I mean, no independent producer that I've ever met has financed a film unless they've guaranteed themselves some sort of pre-sale in advance. Then they make you pay for the loan fees and the loan, and then they make you hire a bond company to guarantee the loan. So they've created a situation where they can't lose. I should have put up the money to Buffalo 66 myself, because once I got a cast like that, there was a no-lose situation for them. Can a film be that personal? The amount of evil and horror and methodical, relentless, conniving that I had to go through to be able to control my film in that way. I promise you, I've never met any other filmmaker who's been able to get away with as much as I got away with in that way. I mean, I control the poster, the trailer, the casting, the shoes, the clothes, the type of film stock, everything. Everything is absurdly slipped, past them. I don't think most directors get a chance to have that kind of impact in their own movies. But I can tell you this, I could certainly not feel comfortable ever making a film without that kind of control unless I was paid a lot of money. And so to me, there's only one of two films. There's ones that I do that are really just a job, and there's others where I have control. A lot of actors say, I do some films just for money and some because I really love the art. It's not about that at all. It's about control. I don't care if I'm doing a mainstream film. As long as I'm in control. If I'm in control of the blockbuster, it's good enough for me. And if I'm out of control in the hip indie film, it feels like shit. And so it's all an issue of control with me. And I hate to sound so aggressive and heavy-handed about it, but most of the people that I come in contact with in cinema are not extremely fanatical about what they're doing, and I prefer to either get to choose to work with people who are fanatical or to take over rather than to delegate jobs out myself. I had a hard time with Buffalo 66 in a lot of ways, but I had a producer who was producing 8 other films at the same time. So he left me to produce the film. And as the producer, then I was able to sneak past them a lot of things. When I go to Sundance, for example, it's not a place where I come away feeling like I've seen some great, personal, incredible breakthrough films. It's a place where I see a bunch of young filmmakers desperate to get, a 3-picture deal with their mainstream, first feature.
Well, we've been talking to filmmaker Vincent Gallo and his terrific new film, Buffalo 66, which is not only a rich and touching story of family trauma and the healing power of love. It also makes you really appreciate the joy of going to the bathroom, this movie. It's a terrific movie. We recommend you check it out. Vincent Gallo, thank you for being on Cellular Dreams. Was great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry I sound so grumpy and aggressive.
Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And so I come to you, my love, my heart above my head.